Hi, everyone. My name is Maren Schroeder. I'm the Coalition Director for the MNisReady Coalition. We are super excited to be at the State Fair with our friends with the Minnesota Hemp Growers Cooperative. This is going to be our last panel of the day, and we're going to be talking about advocacy, what the path forward is in Minnesota for full legalization, and how that intersects with the industry. Just a little bit of my background, and then I'm going to pass the microphone down, let everybody introduce themselves. Like I said, my name is Maren. I am the Coalition Director for the MNisReady Coalition. I am also the Policy Director for Sensible Change Minnesota. I have been in the advocacy space since 2014, and the Coalition is the third organization that I've spun up doing good work.
Hey everybody, my name is Anthony Newby. I'm the owner of Cultivated CBD, and I sit on a number of hemp-related and cannabis-related boards, locally and nationally, including the Minnesota Hemp Growers Cooperative. And happy to be here sharing what I know about the industry, about hemp, and the future of cannabis in general.
Hi everyone, my name is Leili Fatehi. I'm a partner and principal at Blunt Strategies. We are Minnesota's first and only full-service public affairs firm dedicated to the cannabis industry. I'm a lobbyist, political operative. We do a lot of work in the legalization space, including I'm the campaign manager for Minnesotans for Responsible Marijuana Regulation, one of the legalization advocacy groups that is a member of the MNisReady Coalition.
Hi, I'm Laura. I'm a Sagittarius. Excited to be, it's what it feels like.
I like it.
Yeah, well, you know, it's the last one of the day. I am the indica to Leili's sativa, so pretty much everything she said, I do whatever she doesn't want to do, and vice versa.
I love it. So we have some questions, but I think I'm going to start instead by putting Leili on the spot. Can you give us all a brief what the heck is happening at the legislature with full legalization? What has happened and where are we at today?
Yeah, absolutely. So unlike majority of the other states that have legalized adult use cannabis, Minnesota does not have ballot initiatives. And so if we had ballot initiatives, we would already have legalization because the majority of voters in the state of Minnesota, regardless of political party, support legalization of adult use cannabis. But that's not an option for us to put it on the ballot. The only way to legalize cannabis in the state of Minnesota is by getting it through the state legislature. Last year, for the first time in Minnesota, one chamber of our legislature passed a very comprehensive piece of legislation to legalize adult use cannabis. So it passed through the Minnesota House. The chief author on that bill was Majority Leader Ryan Winkler. It had the support of all Democrats and several Republicans in the Minnesota House. But the GOP-controlled Minnesota Senate wouldn't even give the bill a hearing, and that is a consistent theme coming out. And so if we want to legalize adult use cannabis, we need to elect a pro-legalization majority to the Minnesota Senate, and for all intents and purposes, that means a DFL majority.
So I don't know if I missed it, and if I did, you can tell me to shut up. But did you talk about 2019 and what did happen in the Senate?
The kangaroo court?
Yeah, the kangaroo
court.
court.
Yeah. So in 2019, Senate Minority Leader Melissa Franzen, she authored a legalization bill, and this time the Senate GOP did give it a hearing, and they gave it a hearing where they had, and we're lobbyists, we are at the Capitol on all kinds of controversial issues even at times. They had police stationed outside of the hearing room. You had to have a ticket in order to enter. I mean, it was very, like, they set the tone for what their understanding is of who is a proponent of adult use legalization. And instead, what they saw was a room filled with every type of Minnesotan you can imagine. Everything from the longtime grassroots legalization advocates that we have had in the state, to veterans, to nurses, to
Doctors.
physicians. You know, a lot of older individuals are supportive of adult use legalization, seniors, farmers, obviously. They saw it all. And so they were, you know, attempting to have this kangaroo hearing. They had invited some of their favorite, you know, Reefer Madness testifiers from out of state to come. But ultimately, you know, I think that we were able to even utilize that hearing to the favor of the effort towards legalization.
Yeah, I think the press was on our side, even if the Senate committee was not. So I'm going to kind of start down the list of questions, and I'm going to plan to just not answer them unless somebody kicks something back at me, which is kind of a dangerous proposition, but that's how we're going to do this. So let's start off. Why do you think Minnesota is ready for full legalization? Anthony, I'm going to give it to you first.
Sweet. So again, I'm Anthony with Cultivated CBD, and you know, Minnesota's ready. We know from the polling numbers, if you just look at statewide who's in support of cannabis and who isn't, it's overwhelmingly the case that folks want to see this legal. They want to be able to consume adult use cannabis at their leisure. Many are already doing it. Countless numbers of people throughout the state are already doing it. An economy already exists. And it's time that we create a framework to legalize it and tax it and keep it safe and set standards for consumers. And everybody knows that. The overwhelming majority of Minnesotans are in favor of that and believe it to be true. You know, there's also the economic impact, and, you know, coming out of COVID, coming out of the disruptions in Minneapolis. Our company, for example, is based downtown Minneapolis. I live in Minneapolis. Most of our staff works and lives in the metro area. And it's been a very, very difficult last 2 or 3 years. And a bright spot for many of us is the idea that this new emerging economy is here. It exists. We can participate in it. The barriers are lessening every day. And God knows we need some good news in this state at this time in the country. This is an opportunity to do something positive, generate some real income, some real jobs. And for us, one of the most important pieces is these equity gaps that we all know in Minnesota are very real. This is an opportunity to give people an on-ramp to real jobs and real opportunity, again, in a moment that we all desperately need it. And from our vantage point, Minnesotans are in favor not only of legalization, but in favor of closing the gaps that exist in the state and giving us all some real hope for the future.
Sure. Just to kind of pick up where Anthony left off, I think Minnesotans are especially ready to see some of these long-time inequities somewhat reversed, started to be ameliorated. It is long past time that we have thought about the consequences of our long-term actions here with not having any legalization whatsoever. And I think that Minnesotans are ready to see some of these things righted. And this is a very easy thing to do if we legalize correctly, is to expunge and put people's lives back together and hopefully bring them into a new economy.
I think also, look, it is 2022, and a few things are very apparent to people now, especially as other states have been legalizing, and that is that prohibition has failed to achieve every single one of its intended public policy outcomes, and those things that it has achieved have actually been detrimental. to our society. I mean, for one, it makes no sense to people, nor should it, why it is that we have a prohibition on the adult use of a product that is objectively safer and both personally and socially than nicotine or alcohol.
Woo! We like beer too.
And then, there's it has also, prohibition has failed to mitigate any of the things that people, that are considerations with cannabis. Things like ensuring that, minors are not accessing these products. Right now, if you're a high schooler, it is easier to get cannabis than it is to get alcohol. They're not checking your ID to see how old you are. You have no assurance as the consumer what the quality of the product is. It's not keeping it out of anybody's hands. And so, we need to legalize it, tax it, regulate it, and set up a marketplace that is fair for, Minnesota entrepreneurs and growers.
Cool. Thank you, guys. So what is the most important component of the hundreds and hundreds of pages of legislation that will be written to legalize cannabis?
I think it's the automatic expungements are critical. The social equity aspects of this cannot be understated. Prohibition has devastated across generations, communities of color, and that necessarily needs to be baked into the ethos of the legislation that we pass.
Just to add on to that, because yes, 100%. And this is what it looks like when we do this the right way, the smart way, the methodically correct way of going through something like the legislative process. Also, how are we going to pay for the expungements? How are we going to make sure that there's automatic triggers to see the records of the folks that we need to get to first? The folks that might have a more of a complicated story that needs a little bit more time to go through, and making that available versus just you can have it expunged, which we've seen happen in other states, which sounds great and is great until you, as the individual, now have to come up with the money and resources to make that expungement happen. So this is something that, when you do have hundreds and hundreds of pages of a bill, sometimes there's really good stuff in there.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page. We are just coming out of the war on drugs, and it's not over yet. There are people still behind bars today, even in legalized states where there's people in prison for cannabis, and they're looking out across the street at dispensaries on the other side of the street. So, we're in this moment where being very thoughtful and deliberate about the war on drugs and the consequences of that. And we often think of the legacy market, which is the market that exists and has existed. And frankly, that's where the knowledge exists. That's where the economy has existed. Much of it imperfect, much of it bad and needs to go away, and much of it is actually really good. Again, the knowledge around the plant, the growing, the products themselves. There's a whole industry that is moving in this country and has for many, many decades. Prohibition did not kill the industry. It just complicated it with really punitive damages. So we're very fixated on what can we do to bridge the gaps as a company and as a board member for the hemp growers and Minnesota NORML and other national boards. How can we be a bridge to the legacy market and the best and brightest that has existed there, and bring folks into this new and emerging economy all over the state? And if we can do that, I think we'll get some of the best and brightest minds into the industry. And I think we really owe a debt as an industry to what has come before us, and we need to be thoughtful about bridging the gap.
Brilliant. Like literally brilliant. So Leili, I know you already kind of answered this next question, so I'm going to toss it to Laura and Anthony, and that is, what hurdles do you see to legalization? So states like Oklahoma, they may have med, but they have a med program with almost 1 million patients compared to Minnesota, where we have less than 40,000. What hurdles are out there, maybe not even just legislatively, but also socially, toward legalization?
Yeah, well, a lot of the same things that have existed for a while now have, when you have a legacy of prohibition, you have a legacy of making people afraid and scared and worried and thinking that things are evil and going to corrupt our children when they're not. So I think we do have some social stigma still to overcome, but seeing other states and other people just talking more about how they're using cannabis to feel better and to alleviate long-term medical issues or whatever else, that's great. And I think that'll help with some of the social stigma. There's a lot of hurdles to go, for sure. I mean, even for states where it's legal, we still have these banking issues that United States Congress keeps trying to, some of them, keep trying to talk about, and then it goes nowhere. That's a big deal. It would be really nice if, at the same time that we were going to get somebody out of a Russian prison for having a THC cartridge on her, that maybe we looked at our own prison population and thought a little bit about how much we care about people who are incarcerated because they had some marijuana on them. So I think there's a lot of things that we could be doing. There's a lot of hurdles. I mean, it's a mess. Doing it state by state is probably the messiest way we could have done it as a country, but here we are. So
I'm going to quickly just put a little asterisk just because I given my role, cannot miss these kinds of opportunities. Since Laura mentioned U.S. Congress, I just want to flag for people that here in Minnesota, we are very fortunate to have several congressional and also our senators, leaders on this issue. We have seen Angie Craig really lead on this issue in Congress. We've seen Dean Phillips very active on the banking front. Senator Smith has been amazing on this issue. So, just for
thanks to them.
Yeah, and just to kind of riff on the policy side. So I have two thoughts on the difficulties. One, on the policy side, this stuff is very complicated. There are so many layers and so many problems created by prohibition that unraveling it, untangling it, and then putting the best and brightest policies on top of that all at the same time is very difficult. So we should all give ourselves some grace and latitude that it's probably going to take many, many years, maybe decades to get this right. There is no one silver bullet sort of solution that is going to fix all these things. So as an example, we recently partnered with an ice cream company in Minneapolis, and we infused our gummies into the ice cream. We did it in a very legally compliant way. We followed the letter of the law to a T. We followed the letter of the city municipal ordinances to a T, and still were flagged by a licensing department. And the licensing department, frankly, didn't even want to be in that position. So we worked together with the city and X, Y, and Z, and we're back to selling ice cream. Thank God. We only have a few more weeks this summer. Ice cream with cannabis. There's nothing wrong with it. But that's a very minor example of the complexities and how, if we're patient with each other, we can get through it. It's okay for it to be complicated. The other quick thought is less legislative and is more economic. I think we should be very thoughtful and deliberate about encouraging economically through state and federal measures farmers to participate in the industry. So it's very difficult to make money in the industry, period, let alone for our growers all throughout the state. And there's ways that the state could do more to help and encourage and subsidize these farmers to get into the marketplace and not have to worry about turning a profit in year one, because it's probably not going to happen for many years. And the solution isn't to sit it out. We need to figure out some structures at a federal and state level where we're subsidizing, just like we do corn and soybeans and some of these other agricultural products, in ways that support farmers to get them into the market so they can participate, and we all need to grow at a pace together, and that's going to take some time and investments from the state and from the Fed, and I think we could do more in that regard.
So I actually want to answer my own question too, because Anthony said something that made me think. So we just passed this edibles law, and we learned really quick that edibles law didn't do enough. And that edibles law was intended to transition the legacy market or the gray area market, maybe a little bit of both, to a legal market. And what happened in the legislature was like half the legislature didn't care. They didn't want to hear about the issue. They didn't want to talk about it. And at the end of the day, that means you can't attach money or too many regulations. So when we're thinking about the policy, we have to make sure that the legislative leaders are bought into doing this right, or it's going to be done wrong, because frankly, the edibles bill was kind of done wrong. I mean, I worked on it, so I can say that, but
It's gonna be fine.
I mean, it's imperfect, but it's
imperfect, but it was an improvement on what existed before it, which was, I think a lot of people don't realize that these products that contained hemp-derived Delta-9 THC were already federally legal, and so they were coming into the state. Anyone could buy them. There were no limitations on the amount, on who could sell them. But, the only limitation was that nobody in business in Minnesota could profit from it. So
and
fix those problems.
Yeah, and I would also add, like, we had vapes on the market that people were, like, inhaling directly into their lungs that contained contaminants because the testing standards were not anywhere near where they needed to be. They're still not, but at least we did kind of put some of those away. And I mean, I would even go back to my first question. Why do I think Minnesota's ready for legalization? Because there's been lines down the block at hemp shops for people buying edibles. I've been sitting here today with my friends at Balanced, and nearly everyone that's walked up has asked, do you have those D9 gummies? Like, Minnesota is clearly ready.
Well, and, I think to your point, what we are seeing is Minnesotans in some ways voting with their wallets, but, like, we need you to vote with your feet as well. So we really need all the folks that are, and this is why we're working with groups like the Minnesota Hemp Growers Cooperative, why we formed the MNisReady Coalition, is to be able to bring in the folks in industry to do that outreach to consumers, to ensure that they understand what's at stake legislatively and how and who to support.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to riff off that and ask a question that's not on the little list, but whatever. We're all good at this. So we formed the MNisReady Coalition as an advocacy private industry partnership, right? Because like you said, that's how we're going to reach the voters. There are self-reported, there are over 700,000 cannabis consumers in Minnesota. I would guess that that's maybe half of the people that are actually consuming cannabis, especially after this law was passed. So to Anthony, and then I'll reverse the question to Leili and Laura, why is it important for the industry to engage in advocacy?
So as an industry participant, and my business, Cultivated CBD, has been around since day one of CBD legalization, frankly, in the state. We've sort of understood early on that you're either participating in the process to help shape what the market looks like, or you're sitting back, crossing your fingers, and hope things work out in such a way that you can continue doing business. So it was never really an option for us. I come from a long history of activism and organizing and sort of carried those principles into the industry. But there isn't really, in my opinion, an alternative to being involved in politics and policy if you want to really participate in this industry in a serious level, if you want to be here for the long term and not sort of just make a quick buck and get in and get out and make a few dollars in the meantime. If you really are interested and concerned about what the future of the industry looks like, you have to participate. You can do that in many ways. You can contact your local legislators. You can organize your own network of consumers. And you can participate in some of these emerging organizations that are sort of thriving, frankly, around the industry. And there you'll find experts, you'll find policy experts, you'll find product experts, you'll find industry participants like us. You'll find a broad range of folks from, women entrepreneurs and activists and organizers, to black and brown folks at various levels of experience. So I would encourage anybody who's even considering entering into the industry space to take this advocacy side and policy side as seriously as you take your business and invest in it. And if it's not you on your staff, find somebody on your team, recruit somebody onto your team who will really be passionate, track this, pay attention to it. I think you can't be in business without it.
So maybe I'll answer as a lobbyist, and then you can answer as a political player or as a business owner. You know, like the average lawmaker, not even the average lawmaker, pretty much all lawmakers, and you can then throw into that, you know, folks at the agencies and such. Do you think any of them know the difference between like CBD and then HHC and then THC-10 and THC? Like, this is a product with an entire, I mean, you know, it's testing protocols, it's manufacturing processes. These things are technical. And if lawmakers did understand them better, our laws would be better written to actually work for the industry. I think a lot of times folks in industry, especially folks, you know, who are smaller business owners and such, think that they're, you know, the only time that they're interacting with their legislators when they're unhappy about something or they need to be, you know, doing it on the defensive. Legislators love to have access to people who are subject matter experts for them and can help them understand the actual needs of the industry, the actual considerations, how to make a law technically better. And so, you know, folks in industry really should think of their legislators as being a partner for helping them, unless they demonstrate otherwise. And then, you know, that's when you can get the pitchforks out. But in either case, you know, organizations like us, Blunt Strategies, we're always ready and willing to help folks make those kinds of connections with their legislators.
Okay, I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction. Remember a couple years ago when we were all like, systems change, we're going to make it happen, we believe that systems need to change, and we were right. This is one of those times when you can actually do the thing that you wanted to do. Because when you have an industry that's just getting started, especially in this state, when the road is not fully formed into where it's going and how and who gets to be part of it and who gets to determine where it goes, this is the time. This is how we make a better system. It's one thing. It's, you know, maybe small in the microcosm, but it's everything. I mean, this is how we do it better. And being an advocate for what you believe in any part of this that speaks to you, whether it's a business, economic, concept for you, whether it's you as a user yourself, whether it's your social justice prerogatives, this is the opportunity to make a mark on something that will have lasting repercussion.
I love it. I mean, I would, excuse me, I would just addendum asterisk, right? That's what we're doing today. Joining up with a larger association so that you have not just a voice at the table, but also an ear to the ground is going to be huge for industry members going forward. You know, there's organizing happening right now, and if you're behind and not organizing and trying to be out on your own, you're going to be left behind because this policy is going to move fast. It's going to go fast. And as we learned in 2022, sometimes we need to be really, really quiet about it until it goes into effect 6 weeks later. So just my 2 cents. Yeah.
Just a piece of that, again, as an industry operator, just the people on the panel are on my sort of Rolodex speed dial. I can't tell you how many times they've provided pieces of information that were critical to staying in business, to thriving, towards being ready for Delta 9 legalization so that we could provide products on essentially day one because we were part of shaping what that policy would look like. So when these folks are saying join an organization, be part of something bigger than yourself. I can tell you as an industry operator, without that, it doesn't matter how smart our team is and how sophisticated our manufacturing processes are. If we don't have good intel from across a range of voices who are at the Capitol, in City Hall, etc., we wouldn't be able to compete at the level we are. So to sort of piggyback on what you were saying, join an organization. Be part of something bigger than yourself. It will only benefit you as an industry operator.
And vote, damn it.
You know I'm going to turn that into a commercial now, right, Anthony? So I think the last thing I'm going to throw out is how can supporters, consumers, get involved? What is the best way a Minnesotan can engage with this process in order to get cannabis legalized?
So I'll start with something very easy, and that's you don't even have to leave your couch to do any of this. But getting back to those representatives we were talking about, they do represent you, whether you agree with them or not, whether they agree with you or not. But you can find out who represents you. You can find out their email, their phone number, their assistant's name, their assistant's email and phone number, and you can respectfully engage with them and tell them where you live, tell them that you live in their district, they represent you, and this is an issue that you care about. And you should be able to get a conversation of some variety, and if you don't, then that tells you what else you need to know, and my friends up here will tell you what you can do when you are having those feelings. But this is something you can do from the comfort of your kitchen island tomorrow. See who represents you at every level of government, like Anthony was saying, from your city council, because cities are very busy right now, putting moratoriums on everything. So find out who represents you, tell them what you care about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, especially I'm going to say something a little controversial. Usually we don't get this specific with things, but like, if you're an older person, you should take that responsibility because they're going to listen to you a lot more than they do to the people that, again, I mean, there's this stigma, there are these stereotypes. If you live in a rural area, reach out to your legislator. They are likely hearing from fewer of you. We are always amazed, and this is a thing I try to tell people as often as I can. A couple of years ago, Laura and I went around and we talked to legislators from both sides of the aisle, and the question we asked them was, how many, and we asked their staff as well, just to make sure they were giving, non-fluffed answers. How many constituents need to call you about something before you pause and actually, reconsider whether you should, get more information or change your position? On average, they told us 10. At the municipal level, that's even fewer. But 10. They hear from 10 people and they start thinking, maybe I should learn more. Maybe I should start thinking more about this issue. So, you're not a small drop in the pond. It's very important.
And there's some things you can do even today. So I'm looking at two tables, the balanced table and the cultivated table. And there are places there when you can sign up for the MNisReady coalition, to volunteer, to plug in, to get a newsletter. It's very simple, and you can get those emails on your couch at home and decide when you're going to take some action. Join the Minnesota Hemp Growers Cooperative. If you are hearing this wherever you're at, rural Minnesota, down south on the borders, if you're an urban farmer in the heart of Minneapolis or St. Paul, there are ways that as a grower you can plug in. Minnesota Hemp Growers Cooperative is a wonderful place. I'm on the board. It's one of the most well-organized organizations that exist in the state. You'll get real-time information. There's in-person meetings. There's access to legislators. There's briefings when you can come to and learn more about industry practices and policy and hear from lobbyists. And from there, you'll have access to national information as well, because all these folks in these organizations and campaigns are connected. Some folks are interested in what's happening in D.C. and are sort of tracking very closely federal legalization. Well, one of the best pipelines there is the local folks who are communicating directly with our policymakers in D.C. and making trips to D.C. to meet with lobbyists. And lastly, at a local level, if none of that seems accessible, start your own thing. Wherever you live, in whatever town, city, rural area, organize with your neighbors. I know from experience how empowering it can feel to just meet with at your kitchen table or outside at a park with 5 or 10 people who are like-minded can do tremendous things to influence policy, to influence the future of this industry. So there's, no matter how you're positioned, there are things you can do today to influence policy at a local, state, and federal level. Find something that works for you, plug in, and take action.
I've got one more thing to say, and then I'll dismiss everyone from class. So just to, Anthony mentioned this, but I wanna turn back to it. The MNisReady Coalition has a pledge to vote button on our website. Our website is MNisReadyCoalition.org. Click that button, fill out that form. If you're here at the state fair or you're coming to the state fair, there's some MNisReady Coalition buttons here, and if you can show someone here that has the buttons, and they're going to be like Stephanie back there sitting behind the table, if you can show someone that you pledge to vote, they'll give you a button. So, and these are really cool buttons. Did you pledge to vote?
I did, and I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it twice just to be sure. Can I do that?
This is not Chicago.
Can I do this legally?
Yeah, you can pledge twice.
Great.
Cool.
Do it 3 times.
Maren, if they're coming to the fair, where should they come?
You can come. Good call. Laura said I should probably tell everybody where we are. So the Minnesota Hemp Growers Cooperative has a space at the far north end at Hoyt and Underwood. You can park and ride, like I did, to Gate 5 and hop the trolley, so you don't have to walk the whole State Fair Park twice. And it's a nice little space back here. Come hang out. Come visit.
Can I add one thing to that I think is really important for everybody to hear who maybe hasn't participated in this industry? It is some of the smartest, friendliest, kindest, open-hearted people you're going to meet. And that's factually true. There are lots of industries with lots of nice people, but there's just an incredible spirit. I think a lot of it starts with the plant itself. The plant has miraculous traits in and of itself, and most of the folks who are sort of early adopters in the industry follow the spirit and energy of the plant. And so you're going to find kind, open-hearted, inclusive people in this industry. So give it a chance. If you've had negative experiences in other fields and industries or other organizing spaces that haven't quite felt open and welcoming, this might be an opportunity for you to get involved in something that feels totally different and be a part of something from the early days that's, we have an opportunity to shape this state in really interesting and powerful ways. And I encourage anybody who hasn't already done it to put your toe in the water. You won't be disappointed.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, audience.
Thank you, friends.